before we go back.
Please stay standing for our national anthem.
Please stay standing as we play the national anthem of Ghana. Please be seated.
Welcome, everybody. We'd like to start our event with a land acknowledgement. The University of Calgary is located in the heart of southern Alberta. Both acknowledges and pays tribute to the traditional territories of peoples of Treaty 7, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and the Goodstoney First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Alberta District 5 and 6. Thank you.
Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. Before we begin, I would like to welcome one individual to the stage. She is the newest addition of the African Studies program here at the University of Calgary, a new assistant professor teaching who has been launching and re-innovating many of the African Studies classes that are offered here at the University of Calgary. She's going to give the formal welcome to our Vice Provost, EDI, who will be welcoming His Excellency on behalf of the University of Calgary. So I would like you all to give a round of applause to Dr. Motilola Akinfamisoye Adejare.
Thank you very much. Good evening. It's an honor and a pleasure to see all of you this evening. And it's my honor and privilege to introduce to you tonight an important personality who continues to champion the cause of collective thriving and flourishing for all at this university, and that's in person of Dr. Melinda Smith. Dr. Melinda Smith is the Vice Provost and Associate Vice President Research, Equity, Diversity and Inclusion, and Professor of Political Science at the University of Calgary. She specializes in equity, social justice, diversity and intersectionality studies, particularly as they are practiced in post-secondary institutions, as well as in international relations, comparative politics, African security studies, and international inequality. Dr. Smith is an accomplished scholar and is the author or editor of 7 books. She is also editor of 3 books on Africa, including Securing Africa, Post 9/11 Discourses on Terrorism, published in 2010. Dr. Melinda Smith serves on several national bodies, including the External EDI Advisory Board, Innovation, Science and Economic Development, Statistics Canada's Immigration and Ethnocultural Advisory Committee, and member Scarborough Charter Interinstitutional Advisory Committee, among others. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Melinda Smith.
Good evening and welcome. On behalf of my colleagues in the executive leadership team, on the senior leadership team, and our great chancellor, the incomparable, one and only John Cornish, and to all of you who are here following, as we say, on the African continent, all protocols observed, I would like to welcome His Excellency John Mahama and his delegation from across Ghana to Calgary. And thank them for bringing the snow. I would also like to take the opportunity to acknowledge that we have many distinguished guests in the audience. In particular, you have Deputy Minister of Immigration and Multiculturalism, Honorable Ako Ufodiki. We have MLA, and also a former professor in the Cummings School of Medicine, Dr. Luan Metz. And as I pointed out previously, we have, of course, Chancellor Cornish. But let me stress again, in the associate deans and vice deans here. And we also have the delegation from the African Studies program, from anthropology. And this is why on the African continent we say all programs, because you always know in the audience there are distinguished people who ought to be recognized and acknowledged, and probably for whom the list is too long. Let me say a few words about the University of Calgary and also why we are so honored to have His Excellency and delegation here. The University of Calgary is, as you all know, Canada's leading next-generation university with 5 campuses in Calgary, 1 in Qatar, hopefully 1 in Ghana soon. And we also have a University Research and Innovation Park in Calgary and 5 research stations in Alberta, British Columbia, and Yukon. We are an intellectual hub for high-quality research and scholarship, one where students, we hope, will thrive in programs made rich by hands-on experiences and entrepreneurial thinking, grounded in innovative learning and teaching. We are fully integrated with the community, which we both serve and lead. We aim to produce the next generation of leaders who experience the best possible training in acquiring and creating new knowledge. Welcome to the University of Calgary. I also want to say University of Calgary is located in Canada's 3rd most diverse city. We are a city characterized by many firsts. Of course, many of you know we are a city characterized by one of the fastest growing black populations in Canada. The belt between Edmonton, Red Deer, and Calgary is the fastest growing area as black people on the prairies. But in this moment of uncertainty and tumultuous times, of war, of ecological threats, let me say, let us pause and remember that this is a city of trailblazers and a city where we also say we can do. We are the city with the first Muslim mayor in Canada, probably in North America. The city with the first Jewish day school in Canada. First black woman lawyer, Violet King, in Canada, was born here in Calgary. First Canadian-born black justice in Canada, Lionel Jones, was born in Edmonton. We are the place where women first became people in Canada, the Person's Case. This is a city of trailblazers, and this is a city that is characterized by pluralism, and we're in a university where we hope all can thrive. But this is also about celebrating Africa, African diaspora, and I want to say a few things about that. I mentioned that we are the city of the first black woman lawyer, Violet King, and the first Canadian-born black justice, Lionel Jones. But black folks on the prairies and in Calgary have been here over a century and have contributed to building this province. We are a city and a university which is interested in black flourishing. The president, who unfortunately could not be here, signed the Scarborough Charter on Anti-Black Racism and Black Inclusion, which was actually led by a Ghanaian professor, Wisdom Teddy, who is vice principal at the University of Toronto. Wisdom Teddy is the chair of the Scarborough Charter, and I'm the vice chair. Wisdom was a professor here at the University of Calgary and a vice dean of the Faculty of Arts. What's important about that is it's just not a signing. The university is committed to black flourishing, not black surviving, not black getting along, but flourishing. We're interested in inclusive excellence. We're interested in mutuality, and we're interested in accountability. I also want to say that what's also important about this university, and thanks to people like Caesar Apentic, we also have a minor in African studies. It's not new. Many universities are creating black studies or African studies minors and programs. We have had one of the longest ones. And our commitment is to ensure it thrives, because we're not just interested in black scholars being here at the University of Calgary. We are interested in black knowledges. We're interested in African thought. We're interested in African diasporic thoughts, the Caribbean, and of course the centuries and generations of black scholars and black folks who are in Atlantic Canada. So you come at an auspicious time. This is the almost the apex of the UN Decade for People of African Descent, where we are interested in questions of justice, we are interested in questions of development, but we in particular, as I said, are interested in flourishing. So I want to give you just a few highlights about some of the work we're doing at the University of Calgary around Black flourishing. I mentioned the Scarborough Charter. I mentioned African studies, which I think is important and which we all need to continue to work to develop. And I think your visit here really helps us to ground that work in, obviously, the continent, but also the country, which is at the heart of decolonization, the heart of independence, and the heart of Black autonomy. Many of us in the diaspora and from the Caribbean originally, we ground ourselves in our history in what Ghana did. Where Ghana go, we go. So thank you for this, and thank you for Ghanaian leadership, not just on the continent, but in the diaspora largely, and also here at the University of Calgary. We are committed, and we know you are too, to the next generation of African and diaspora scholars. And so at the University of Calgary, we have things like the postdoctoral fellows for Indigenous and Black scholars. But for new and emerging scholars, we also have committed to the next generation. Many of you in this room, many like Ebenezer and Sanit, who we know we soon hope to be, and Semhar, and we want to be calling them prime minister, and we want to be calling them a premier, and so we want to be calling them diplomats. So that's our goal, and we're hoping your visit here will help to ignite this change for the generations to come. So as I said, we also have with Semhar, I had the privilege of starting the Viola King Engage Scholar Award. And what I can say, Your Excellency, is you couldn't have been invited and by a more engaged, brilliant, aspirational group of young people than those who are standing back there before us. We are standing on the shoulders of giants, and as we say on the continent, if you want to go fast, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think with these students and the people in this room and you here, we're going to go far, and we're going to go together. And so we are grateful for having you here. And on behalf of my colleagues in senior leadership and the Dean of Arts, Aoife McNamara, and the Chancellor and all who are here, I want to welcome you to the city of Calgary. Thank you for the snow, which I hope you take back with you. And we wish you a great visit. Thank you all very much for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, for your welcoming remarks on behalf of the University of Calgary senior leadership team. We are about to pass the mic to His Excellency, but there's a Ghanaian tradition that His Excellency and presidents need to be welcomed through a certain cultural dance that is about to be played before you. So without further ado, I would like us to welcome the Ghanaian royal dancers to the stage.
Yeah.
Round of applause. We're so blessed to witness this form of incredible Ghanaian art and dance before us here today. Thank you all for being patient with us. Before we begin, there is still one more performance that we'd like to share with you all today by our wonderful Ghanaian royal dancers. So please enjoy the next performance. you for that beautiful performance. So without further ado, it's time to get to the main section of our event. And I have the privilege and honor of welcoming a very mighty Ghanaian who leads the African Studies program at the University of Calgary, Dr. Roland Caesar Apentic, who will be welcoming His Excellency.
Hello and welcome, everybody. Your Excellency, the fourth President of the Fourth Republic, Your Excellency, the High Commissioner to Ghana to Canada, University of Calgary Senior Management Team, Minister, faculty, community members, ladies and gentlemen, and students, don't forget, we are the main body, we are here. On behalf of the University of Calgary, the Calgary Ghanaian Association, the Calgary community, it is an honor to add my voice in welcoming His Excellency to the University of Calgary. It is indeed a pleasure to introduce our speaker for this prestigious African Speaker Series. Our speaker tonight was the fourth President of the Fourth Republic of Ghana between 2013 and 2017. Prior to that, he served as Vice President of Ghana from 2009 to 2012. Our speaker made history by being the first President of Ghana to serve in all levels of political office, including a Member of Parliament, a Minister, Vice President, and eventually President of the Republic of Ghana. Our speaker tonight is an expert in communication. You see that yourself, historian, avid reader, and writer. Over the course of his career, he has authored a number of publications for international and national papers. He has also published his first book, a memoir entitled My First Coup d'etat and Other True Stories from the Lost Decade of Africa. Ghana, under our speaker tonight, witnessed a massive infrastructure development in all sectors of the economy, including education, health, ports, roads, and so forth. His vision and strategic investment in these areas today have laid a solid foundation for Ghana, which is almost now at the stage of lower middle income country. Beyond investment in the social economic infrastructure, our speaker also believed in investing in people and his desire to ensure social justice, equity, and this was reflected in his promotion of girls' and women's interests at all levels. Indeed, it was during his administration that Ghana attained gender parity in basic education. He also ensured the appointment of many women to high positions in his administration, and his last presidential bid, he selected an accomplished woman as his presidential candidate, the first by a major political party in Ghana to do so. Aside from serving as the President of Ghana, our speaker tonight is also a former chair of the the Economic Community of West African States and the first co-chairman of the United Nations Advocacy Group on the Sustainable Development Goals. He is currently the chairperson of TANA Forum, a high-level forum on security in Africa, which has its headquarters in Ethiopia. In recognition of his silent contribution to the continent and as a leader, he has been conferred with several honorary degrees, doctorate degrees from distinguished universities, including the University of Aberdeen. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming His Excellency John Mahama.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. Kindly resume your seats. Thank you. Let me thank all of you for the warm welcome I've received since I arrived in Calgary and also on your campus of the University of Calgary. Your university is quite popular in Ghana, and many Ghanaian students aspire to come here to further their education. And since I came, I've met many of our students who are studying here, and they speak highly of the education they are getting. So I want to thank you very much. I want to thank also our young traditional dancers. One of the challenges of modernization is that you face an erosion of your culture. And so to see these young girls, dance so gracefully gives me a lot of pleasure. And to think that they were born here, and so they have learned how to dance. I guess they dance better than me, the traditional dances. And what they danced was called the Adua, which is popular with the Akan people in Ghana. Ghana is a very diverse nation with many ethnicities, but this dance is typical with the Akan people. And the first one showed the procession of a royal, a king or a queen, and the umbrella is the symbol of authority. I remember there was a funny incident when the king of Ashanti went to attend the coronation of King Philip, and he received the kings whom he had invited from across the world. When the Ashanti king went to meet him, there was somebody following him with an umbrella. And people said, what? It's not raining, it's not in the sun. What does he have an umbrella over his head for? So for those of you who are wondering, it's a symbol of his authority and his office. And so it was the same. The lady behind was the queen, and the two were her attendants. And I want to thank them for a very beautiful performance. I was in Halifax for a program. And the evening we got there was miserable. It was raining, and it was a cold, rainy day. And my hosts were apologizing for the lousy weather. And I just joked. I said, well, when I packed my things, I remembered to pack a sliver of sunlight along. And so Air Canada will be delivering it the following morning. And so I'm sure that we'll have some sunny days. And the gods of Halifax listened to me. The next day we had bright sunny days. And for the 3 days I was there, the sun, smiled on us. And they said, wow, that was magic. And I said, unfortunately, I didn't bring enough. It will end at the weekend. And true to form, when I was leaving that weekend, it started raining again. I thought I could pull the same trick here, but I guess the gods of Alberta have their own mind. They wanted to give me a foretaste of Alberta's winter. And so I came in on a snowy day. Unfortunately, I couldn't bring you sunlight. And so just enjoy the snow as it is. Thank you very much. There are a lot of acknowledgements. Dr. Ed McCauley, Dr. Bill Gali, Dr. Janaka Ruwampura, Dr. Malinda Smith, who was very kind to give us the foreword, Dr. Ian Gates, Dr. McNamara. Oops, sorry. This camera cover has ideas of its own. Dr. McNamara and our Chancellor, faculty, students, the Ghanaian and African community joining us today, ladies and gentlemen. I feel very honored to speak at this prestigious institution on advancing West Africa's development strategy. This paper is mercifully short. I believe that the interaction will be more interesting than inflicting my unilateral ideas on you. So this paper will allow us to explore how we can collectively advance the development of the West African sub-region of Africa, including the role of international and diaspora investors. Allow me first to express my gratitude to the University of Calgary for the invitation and for providing the platform to address one of the many crucial matters of concern to us in Africa. During my time in Canada over the last week, I've been discussing various topics, including the transatlantic slave trade, colonization, and the issue of reparations, I've also emphasized the need for Africans, particularly West Africans, to take control of our own destiny and reshape our continent's narrative to unlock the opportunities available to guarantee economic growth. The connection between the impact of the slave trade on Africa and the importance of advancing West Africa's development strategy is undeniable. The theme is also fundamental to the vision underpinning the establishment of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS for short, which is an organization I had the privilege of chairing when I was President of the Republic of Ghana. Under my leadership, ECOWAS navigated challenging situations such as regime disturbances like the coup in Burkina Faso and the disturbances in Mali, and also effectively managed the 2015 Ebola outbreak in West Africa. I'm convinced that the most effective path towards sustainable development in Africa is a united effort by all Africans as envisioned in the African Union's the Africa We Want Agenda 2063. We must do more to uplift West Africa from poverty and squalor. For today's discussion, I'll focus primarily on West Africa, but occasionally touch on broader African strategies for development, such as the liberation of Ghana and West Africa, which our first president, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, a great Pan-Africanist, said was connected to the total liberation of Africa. The actual quotation is that the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent. And that was because Ghana was the first to achieve independence in sub-Saharan Africa. And our president said that it was meaningless for us to be independent if the rest of our brothers and sisters continue to live under colonial bondage. My talk this evening will be brief and will be aimed at provoking further discussion. I look forward to the interaction after my preliminary presentation, which will set the right tone for this conversation. West Africa requires a comprehensive approach that addresses critical issues of economic growth, infrastructure development, human capital investment, regional cooperation, and good governance. Moreover, the region urgently needs strong partnerships with the private sector to drive innovation, technology transfer, and international collaboration. The University of Calgary provides an excellent platform for me to advocate for West Africa because of the inherent diversity of the community you have here. The institution's wide range of programs and research opportunities attract students from across the globe. At the same time, the city of Calgary offers a rich blend of Western culture, natural beauty, sports events, and vibrant festivities. Engaging with the international business community and the African diaspora in Canada and inviting them to invest in West Africa is to me a reasonable call to make. And one of the first meetings I had when I stepped here in Canada was with the Alberta International Business Community. Yesterday, here in Calgary, at a business forum organized by the Canada Chamber of Commerce, I shared with the audience the state of Ghana's economy and how we can revitalize it, and the investment opportunities available for willing Canadian and African diaspora investors. It's been reported that the Ghanaian diaspora population as of 2020 was around 1.2 million people, and that is against a total population of Ghanaians of about 29 million. The 2016 population and housing census also suggests that approximately 25,570 odd Ghanaians reside here in Canada. These figures might have increased significantly today, considering the ongoing increase in Ghanaians traveling abroad. It is evident that Ghanaians in the diaspora, like many other countries in West Africa, contribute significantly towards their country's development. They provide support through remittances, they create jobs through investments in various sectors, they reverse the brain drain by sending valuable expertise back home, they facilitate trade and partnerships through their networks and promote our culture to stimulate tourism. Foreign remittances are a steady source of income for many families and contribute about almost $5 billion annually to Ghana's economic growth. The diaspora population is invaluable for social, political, economic, and cultural development of our nation. Therefore, governments must engage with their citizens abroad, recognize their immense potential, and establish platforms that encourage collaboration without exploitation or corruption. As governments, we should leverage the extensive networks established by our citizens in their adopted countries to facilitate trade and partnerships, and also serve as ambassadors for African culture, traditions, and heritage in order to promote tourism. Despite the positive contributions of the diaspora and the genuine efforts made by various governments in West African countries, the sub-region continues to face numerous challenges. These challenges include high poverty rates, lack of relevant education and skills acquisition. Other challenges are healthcare, inadequate infrastructure, unemployment, over-reliance on raw material exports, climate crisis, corruption, insufficient transportation and telecommunications network, limited access to formal financial services for businesses, internal conflicts, insecurity, and political instability. Many factors have reversed significant gains that were made under the Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs, and many people in the sub-region currently live in poverty and subsist on less than $2 a day. This creates a revolving intergenerational poverty cycle. Like other parts of Africa, West Africa relies heavily on exporting raw materials like oil, minerals, and agricultural products, which make the region vulnerable to global shocks. Agriculture, coastal areas, and natural resources are also under threat due to climate crisis. Lack of accountability and corruption are also prevalent in many West African countries, undermining economic growth and development. This creates public distrust, misallocation of resources, and limits foreign investment. The sub-region also requires more infrastructure, including modern, efficient transportation systems, power supply, and telecommunications networks. West Africans need more access to formal financial services, especially among the small and medium enterprises. As I said, we're grappling with internal conflicts, and recently there's been a spate of coups d'etats across West Africa. There's also a violent insurgency in the Sahelian belts, which is caused mostly by Islamist terrorism and has been fueled partly by the collapse of the Gaddafi regime in Libya, which has made a flow of small arms and other arms come into the Sahelian area, which is used by these insurgents. The climate crisis, for example, in my country has created a humanitarian disaster for people residing along the Volta River, which is the main river that we have in Ghana. It crisscrosses our country from north to south. More than expected rainfall in the catchment area of the Volta River has resulted in the Volta River Authority opening the spill gates of the Akosombo hydroelectric dam, leading to flooding and displacement of families, disrupting businesses, and shutting down health and educational facilities. The resulting floods have displaced tens of thousands of people living in precarious conditions without adequate relief in terms of shelter, food, water, and sanitation. As we speak, government has not been able to adequately respond to the disaster because of the challenges we face with the economy, the debt burden, and the lack of a disaster preparation plan before the decision to spill was made. While our challenges are immense, I'm glad to say that West Africa is making significant progress and has great potential to become a global economic hub in the near future if the right conditions are created for it to take off. This gives me hope that West Africa can overcome its difficulties and advance its development. Advancing West Africa's development, however, requires a comprehensive intersectoral approach. And some of the strategies we must prioritize include: 1, economic diversification and value addition. As I said, West Africa is mainly an exporter of raw material. A lot of the value addition takes place in the north, and the finished exports are re-exported to other parts of the world, including Africa. So even though Ghana is the second leading producer and exporter of cocoa, much of the processing of cocoa into finished products like chocolates and everything takes place in the north. And so Belgium is known better for chocolates, Switzerland is known better for chocolates, and yet you don't see any cocoa trees growing in any of those countries. And so it is important that we not only diversify our production, but we also add value so that can create employment opportunities for young people in our countries. Ghana is a leading exporter of gold in Africa today, and yet all that gold is exported as raw bullion. And when it goes to the destinations in the north, it is refined, and immediately the price of refined gold is almost twice that of raw bullion. And when you even process it into jewelry, it's even far more expensive than refined gold. And so if some of that value addition can be brought home, then it will create more employment opportunities. Same with oil. Nigeria is a leading producer of oil. Ghana produces some 200,000 odd barrels of oil a day, but a lot of that oil is exported, and it goes to other places for refining, and then we re-import the finished products. Investment in critical infrastructure, airports, railway, and ports. Because of the experience of colonization, the infrastructure in respect of transport are geared towards the colonial metropolis. And so, for instance, the railways that were built in Ghana come from the bauxite producing areas, the gold producing areas, and the cocoa producing areas directly to the port, so that the material can be loaded onto ships and shipped out directly to Europe. Even as we have introduced the African Continental Free Trade Area, we suddenly realize that there are no transportation links between African countries. And so if you want to ship something from one part of Africa, it's most likely going to go to a European destination before it's transshipped back into Africa. There are no railways crisscrossing the continent, and so you cannot send anything by rail from Ghana to Kenya or vice versa. And so we need to look at developing our airports, developing railway links, and developing our ports, and also constructing our roads. Human capital development, skills upscaling, technical and vocational, and entrepreneurial training. Like Canada, but you've been successful in diversifying your education. Like Canada, we inherited a colonial British education, which is mainly based on grammar school training. And so we had a lot of people finishing school from the secondary level, speak very good English, but absolutely no skills to go into the world of work. And so how to change that and create an educational system that promotes skills acquisition in terms of technical skills, vocational skills, so that if children are not able to advance into tertiary education, they can go into the world of work and be able to earn a living for themselves. So these are some of the things that we are battling with. Entrepreneurial training. Of the 29 million people we have in Ghana, less than 1 million are employed by the public sector. And if you take the entire population, less than 20% of the population works in the formal sector. The rest work in the informal sector. And so the chances of students coming out and getting a job immediately is constrained. And so one of the things we need to do is to equip them with entrepreneurial skills so that they're able to start up businesses of their own and become employers instead of become employees. Because if young people set up businesses, they would employ their fellow young people to work in those businesses. And so that's something we look at. Regional cooperation, enforcing the ECOWAS trade liberalization scheme. We have a duty-free scheme in West Africa that allows us to export into each other's countries. If 60% of the content of the product is sourced from within the country, and so if 60% of any product is sourced from within the country, you can export it from Ghana into Nigeria and vice versa. But we have informal blocks to this free trade because you have barriers where when you're transporting items between countries, there are unfortunately these security officers who take a value-added tax, an informal value-added tax for themselves, and so they make the cost higher to be able to exchange goods amongst ourselves. There's also the need for good governance in the institutions and strengthening of the institutions. When I was vice president to Professor Atta Mills, one of the distinguished people we hosted as soon as we came into government was President Obama. He paid his first visit to Africa. Ghana was the first country he visited, and he had the honor of addressing our parliament, and I was present there. And one of the critical things he said was that Africa does not need strong leaders. Africa needs strong institutions. And I think I do agree with him. Because you can leave the leaders to the shenanigans that they want to do. If the institutions are strong and are working, then it really does not spoil anything. I remember Belgium went without a government for almost 2 years because they couldn't agree on how to form the government. But the country continued to run. People continued to receive services, basic services. If you wanted a passport to travel, it was delivered in the time that it had to be delivered. They had access to water, they had access to electricity and all that. When you're in leadership in Africa, you find that you have to deal with more basic issues because of the weakness of the institutions. So strengthening institutions is important. Good governance, respect for human rights, freedom of expression, creativity, unleashes creativity, and these are all important. Private sector engagement, conditions for attracting indigenous and foreign capital. We must promote both foreign direct investment and also the investment by our indigenous people. Often, because of the desire to attract foreigners to come and invest, we give so many concessions to foreign investors, but then Ghanaian investors who raise their capital to invest do not enjoy the same conditions. And so balancing out and removing the discrimination between foreign investors and indigenous investors is one of the things we need to look at. Foreign investors get tax holidays. They are able to write off their equipment at an accelerated depreciation rate, not the same for our own indigenous investors. So there's one of the things that I think we should look at. Technological innovations, international cooperation, making the African Continental Free Trade Area work. The protocol has been signed by almost all African countries. It is now the commitment to making it work and putting the framework for it to work. For instance, we need a payment system that does not have to go from our local currencies into the US dollar and then back to some other currency. And so if I want to import something from, say, Kenya, and I have cedis, I have to change those cedis into dollars to do the transaction in paying for those exports. And then when that transaction gets to Kenya, it's converted again into Kenyan shillings to pay whoever is exporting the material to me. So we need a direct payment platform. And I think that that is engaging the attention of our leaders currently. And if we had that, it will facilitate the trade more between African countries. Regional integration and free movement of people. We have achieved and signed the protocol for free movement of goods and services. But what of the human beings? We are 54 countries. If I want to travel to, say, Mozambique today, I have to look for a visa. If a Mozambican has to travel to Ghana, he must get a visa. If a Ghanaian has to travel to, say, Algeria, he needs a visa. And so if the goods can move freely, why can't the human beings move freely? And so removing visa restrictions in order that Africans' skill and labor can move freely across the continent is one of the tasks that we need to achieve. And it will be a benefit for all of us. When I was president, we went to the African Union, and there's a protocol for free movement of people that we were supposed to sign. At the last minute, a few countries balked and said we should postpone signing it. I was very disappointed that we didn't sign that protocol. And so when I came back to Ghana, I said, look, okay, we're not going to wait for the rest of Africa. We're going to implement it. And so I signed an executive instrument and said that any African passport holder can acquire a visa on arrival at our airport. The sky didn't fall down the next day. It didn't lead to any abnormal movement into Ghana. And today that facility is still available for African passport holders. And so it makes business people able to come and go freely than it was before, when they had to go and queue to apply for visas. Some countries are beginning to follow suit. While I was here in Canada, it was notified that South Africa had issued a 90-day visa-free facility to Ghanaians. But it shouldn't be to only Ghana, it should be to everybody. It should be to Nigeria, it should be to all other countries, that we can move freely across our own continent and be able to do business. Social inclusion, fair distribution of the fruits of growth, and inclusion of a diverse ethnicity. And I know that here you take diversity and inclusion very seriously. In Ghana, you might see all of us, we all look alike, but we come from different parts of the country, and so we must continue to work and making sure that opportunities that the country has to offer are open to all our people, and not just to a few who belong to a political party or come from a certain part of the country or of a certain religion or a certain gender. And so these are things we need to continue to work on. Organizations such as ECOWAS, the African Development Bank, and the African Union must collaborate closely to pool resources and work synergistically. We must enhance access to finance for small and medium enterprises to foster entrepreneurship as we create well-paying and decent jobs. As I said already, infrastructure development should focus on transportation networks, energy generation, distribution, and water and sanitation systems. And so when I was president, one of my strategies was to use infrastructure development as a vehicle for economic transformation. And so the intention was to create Ghana into a hub for aviation. And so one of the things we achieved was to build a brand new terminal building, which in Ghana is called Terminal 3, and it rivals any terminal anywhere in the world. It's one of the, among the top 10 best in Africa. And we've seen an increase in passenger traffic because people are traveling from Sierra Leone and Liberia and other West African countries and coming and transiting through Ghana to other parts of the world. We built a new port because the first port was built by our first president in the 1960s. And if you looked at the volume of traffic that was coming in, because the landlocked countries take some of their goods from Ghana. And so our own imports and the imports from the landlocked countries and our exports to the rest of the world were constrained by the limited space in the harbor that we had. And so without putting it on public debt, we got a collaboration of foreign investors and our own Ghana Ports and Harbors Authority to build us a brand new port. It's almost 3 times bigger than the size of our old port, and it also is one of the most efficient in terms of ship turnaround in West Africa. And so these are things we need to do. We need to build the railways, we need to develop the roads and all that. International cooperation and regional integration efforts should be encouraged. Finally, social inclusion should be central to our development strategy, as inequality remains a pressing issue that must be addressed. One of the reasons for the re-emergence of coup d'etats in the sub-region is the absence of social inclusion arising from the widening gap among the people. This widening gap can be seen between the rich and the poor, and it can also be seen between the urban poor and the urban rich, and also between people in the urban centers and the rural areas. If we as leaders to whom our citizens entrust the management of our economies provide visionary leadership and implement effective development strategies within the framework that tackles the misalignment of our economy's management formula, will contribute to good progress in our countries. As members of the African diaspora population, you have a vital role to play in shaping our development trajectory. As a Ghanaian leader and the leader of the main opposition party, the National Democratic Congress, I assure you that my team and I are developing a policy blueprint to address our economic challenges and redefine our development strategy in Ghana. We're committed to ensuring that Ghanaians in the diaspora are not discriminated against and can hold positions with a comparative advantage because of the comparative advantage they have in terms of knowledge and experience. As we prepare for our next elections, we are actively engaging with different groups, including the diaspora population, to incorporate the ideas and suggestions into our political manifesto. And so let me once again thank the University of Calgary and the Ghanaian community for the invitation and for providing a platform for me to discuss West Africa's development strategy. Together we can overcome our challenges and pave the way for a brighter future. I thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much. For our next Q&A portion, I'll be introducing the moderator. Saka Suleimana Saka, hailing from Tuna in the Savannah region of Ghana, is a dedicated student and active advocate for graduate students' needs, especially international students. He is a PhD candidate in the Department of Political Science and has been honored with the Government of Canada Tri-Council funding for the Social Sciences and Humanitarian Research Council. His dissertation research focuses on the overtime and cross-national variations on the ministerial appointments across Africa, with a particular emphasis on the contribution of women cabinet ministers in policy making. Beyond academics, Saka has showed exemplary commitment to student leadership. In 2023 academic year, he held the position of president of the Graduate Student Association of the University of Calgary, the first black president in recent memory. In recognition of his leadership, the Government of Alberta appointed him to the University of Calgary Board of Governors, a role he held until June 2023. Please help me welcome Saka to the stage.
There's a lot of pressure. Thank you so much, Senate, for the wonderful introduction. First of all, I would like to thank President Mahama and his delegation for being here with us tonight. And I believe, like many people in the room today, it means a lot when you have an African leader come and speak with African students. Representation, I believe, is very critical for the forward marching of the African continent. And as a black population, having you here means a lot to us. To emphasize this point, let me just briefly share this story. I grew up in Tona, a small town in the Savannah region of Ghana, and we didn't have the luxury of watching our leaders on TV. But what we had was they would print posters. I'm sure, how many Ghanaians are in the room today? Good. You remember Know Your Leaders, Know Your Political Leaders? Yeah. President Mahama happened to be the only face for a long time coming from my side of the country, the Bole traditional area, and your presence and participation in high political office meant a lot to people like me and kids like me. You were a role model for me and many underprivileged kids, and in full disclosure, I still see you as a role model. As a leader, you made us feel represented in governance, so thank you for your service to our country. Now to our Q&A session. There are two mics to either side of the room. I will encourage you to form a queue of 3 at a time. But first, we gave President Mahama 2 questions just to start it off. And again, based on my bio and given that I wrote the questions, they revolve around governance and his drive for women's inclusion in politics in Ghana. So the first question for President Mahama today is, I listened to your keynote session in Toronto 2 days ago. One of the points that you raised during the Q&A period was about public expenditure. You discussed the point that the current government has an order of 125 ministers. I want to pick on this point and ask the following questions. You are the only president of the Fourth Republic to appoint the most women ministers to cabinet. Not cabinet ministers are different from the ministerial population as a whole. So what were some of your considerations in bringing these women into government or bringing them to governance? The second question is, there have been some concerns around how women ministers are often treated in the Ghanaian political climate. And I'm curious to know what your thoughts are in terms of certain speculations about ministers, especially women ministers, often not treated fairly compared to their male counterparts. And how do we deal with this problem to make sure that Ghana, again, becomes an example for the rest of the continent?
Okay.
So those are the two questions we will start with.
Thank you. Yes, we had a commitment to achieve a certain percentage of women in government. And it actually started with my predecessor, Professor John Mahama, and I just continued what he had started. And so we appointed women to many key ministries. It was not like just lip service and just appointing them to decorate some ministries. Our foreign minister was Madam Hannah Tete, very qualified woman. Today she's the Undersecretary General for the Horn of Africa, and she is dealing with the conflicts in South Sudan, Somalia, and all those places. Very accomplished woman. And so she was the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Our Minister for Attorney General and Ministry of Justice, and the Attorney General's department is the department in charge of public prosecutions. And so that was Marietta Brew Apia Opong. She was the Attorney General, and that's a very important position. Our Minister for Fisheries was Madam Sharia Iti. Unfortunately, she passed just about 2 months ago, but she was in charge of fisheries. And while she was in charge of the fisheries sector, she expanded the production of fish through aquaculture, and then also clamped down on illegal and unlicensed fishing, because Ghana was in danger of being put on the red list, in terms of banning our export of fish products because of unlicensed and unregulated fishing. And so she had that difficult job, and she managed to do it. We had others in tourism. Madam Elizabeth Ofosajari was the Minister for Tourism, and I sent her there because we wanted to expand and diversify our economy, and tourism is one of the areas in which Ghana has a comparative advantage. And so sending a capable minister there was important. And she is a lawyer, has a background in law, and she was a very capable person. And so we put her in the Ministry of Tourism and Creative Industry. There are several other women, gender and children. Nana Oyeluta was an activist for the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative. And we poached her from the Commonwealth and brought her to lead our gender and social protection ministry. So there were so many of them occupying very good positions, even outside government. The director of prisons was a woman. The controller and accountant general was a woman. The chief justice was a woman. I mean, women occupied so many important positions. And I must say that some of my best performing ministers were women. And so when they say when they say what a man can do, women can do better, I am a convert. I accept that they're able to do better in many cases than men, and they proved to be more honest. They had more integrity, you know, in terms of how they conducted themselves. So it was a good experience, and if I given the chance, I'll do it again. With regards to reshuffle, I never actually reshuffled any female minister because, I mean, there was no need to reshuffle them. They were all performing very well. But I think I remember what you're talking about. It was recently where a minister who had won accolade as one of the best performing ministers was reshuffled and eventually dropped from government. Actually, she was asked to take a diplomatic appointment or something like that. So those are hazards. I don't know what, you know, informed the president's decision, but normally the president has the best overview of their people, and so if even somebody recognizes you as the best performing minister, the president probably needs you somewhere else other than where you are. So,
thank you so much. Okay, we will now take questions from either side of the room, but I'll go to my right first. Here's how it should go. Please just introduce yourself and then ask your question.
My name is Abdi Baraya. I'm from the Political Science Department of University. Thank you, Estelle, for the talk. It was really interesting. My question is on the representation of women in the political space in Ghana. I remember where I was when it was announced that you had to pick a female running mate in basically, and I remember how I felt. I just said, yes, yes, we are getting somewhere. It was an exciting time, and the whole narrative and the discourse in the country it was an interesting movement. It was a pivotal movement. And it's very interesting also and refreshing to hear you speak about female representation the way you have to speak. So my question is this simple. Would you consider another
Yes, I'll definitely consider a female running mate. Yeah. We have two main parties in Ghana, and power has shifted between the two main parties. But since we started the Fourth Republic in 1992, it was the first time that a major political party had selected a female as the running mate. I do believe that in the very near future, there will be a female vice president, and in the not too distant future, there will be a female president of Ghana.
To make it easier, let's take two questions at a time, okay? Or three at a time. Please make it brief. Okay, I'll take two more at that time, and then we come to the
Two on this side.
Yes,
and
two
three
on
on
this
that
side
side.
before we come to you. Yes, great.
Hello, Excellency. Thank you very much for being in Calgary. I just want to say quickly that your late Prof, John Adam Mills, who I had the privilege to meet in Calgary in 2002, was between being vice president and later becoming president, so there might be a precedent there for coming to Calgary. So, just really quickly, Ghana and Alberta are both kind of in the same boat. We're both now, Ghana is now, for the last decade, a fossil fuel producer, oil and gas, right? You're up to 200,000 barrels a day, plus or minus, plus gas. You've also mentioned that you were involved with the SDGs, promoting the SDGs at the UN. So the conundrum is this. As somebody here, Chris Roberts, who teaches in political science here at the university, African politics, politics of development. Given the concern for greenhouse gas emissions, but energy poverty across Africa, here's the basic question. Should African countries be more supported by the West, or the global North, in their efforts to develop fossil fuels to drive economic development, or should there be some other kind of option or funding for those countries and keeping the fossil fuels in the ground? This is a central debate that's driving development concerns today. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, President.
One more.
Thank you very much. My name is Abdurrahim Mutawakil. I'm a Ghanaian student in the Department of History. Yeah, and I'm really glad to see my former president here. My question has to do with something he touched on in his speech. That's to do with a statement President Obama made in 2009. Then I was in first year at the university in KNUST. But it's been about 10 years, or more than 10 years now, since he made that statement. But most of us hailing from Ghana, and for that matter Africa, can say that that problem, the problem of weak institutions, still persists. The question is, what is responsible for that? And whose responsibility is it to strengthen these institutions? Thank you.
Okay. Professor Mills took a sabbatical after the 2000 election. He had been our candidate. He had been vice president and he became candidate of our party. And so after he lost, he took, I think, a 1-year sabbatical. And he came out here to Canada to teach. And I didn't realize that I was in Calgary, but that is significant. And so I guess I'm following in his footsteps in traveling here. Yes, we're in the transition period from fossil fuels to green energy. But we all recognize that Africa has contributed the least to the current problem that we have in terms of global warming. And so we've been advocating a position in all the COP summits that we have gone, that Africa must be treated differently in terms of its progression to green energy. We need the revenues from the fossil fuels that we produce to be able to invest in our people and raise our people from poverty. Indeed, investments, we saw a decline in investments in potential oil fields in Ghana because we have other oil fields that could be developed. ExxonMobil pulled out of oil exploration in Ghana because of the transition to green energy, and so they closed fields that they thought, were not as strategic to them. Incidentally, after the Ukraine-Russia war, somehow new money is available to invest in some fields. We currently have 3 fields: Jubilee Field, 10 Field, and ENI Sankofa. That's offshore Cape 3 Points. And we have a potential one, which is Deepwater Tunnel, which at first was being explored by Hess, the American giants, and then they sold it off to Aker, which is from Norway. And Aker has recently pulled out and sold to the African Finance Corporation. We're looking to see if we can bring that on stream because that would produce extra crude oil. But more importantly for us is the associated gas, liquid natural gas. We're using the bulk of it to produce electricity, to power thermal stations, to provide electricity for our people. And so that we will continue to do because, of course, it's cleaner than using crude oil to fire the thermal plants that we have. We currently are producing about 204 billion standard cubic feet of gas. And that is a critical resource that we can use to power our own electricity generation. And if we have excess, we can liquefy that and export it to other countries that are in need of LNG. And so that's a very strategic area for us. And it is our advocacy that Africa should be treated differently, in terms of the transition to green energy. But we have a potential for green energy. We have a lot of sunlight, and that's why I could bring a bit of it when I went to Halifax, because we have more than we need, and I could ship some to Alberta if you guys are interested. But solar is definitely a major way to go, and we've started to see solar being fed into our national grid. But we're also seeing a lot of off-grid solar where people are adding solar to their mix so that it reduces how much they are drawing from the national transmission. Thank you. Oh, sorry. The weak institutions. Sorry about that. A lot of the institutions have existed for quite a long time, like the judiciary. The judiciary has always been there, and so it has its own traditions. But of course, it's a very conservative institution based on that whole country with power, it's very difficult to achieve. And so it might be better to allow the states to put in some of their own generation and their own distribution. And I think that that would lead to a more efficient. Ghana is a smaller country, so even though our electricity company of Ghana is not as efficient as we want it to be, at least it's able to make sure that the lights are on in most parts of Ghana. But if Nigeria recovers, it will have a good effect on Ghana's economic recovery too. Yeah, there were protests in Nigeria, there were protests in Ghana, and it is a good thing because I think that the young people should be allowed to vent their frustration. There are diminishing opportunities for young people in our country because our economies are not growing at the pace they should in order that they are able to create the multiplier effect for businesses and opportunities for young people. And it's not a problem with only Ghana and Nigeria, it's a problem across the African continent. We have the fastest growing youth population, and unfortunately our economies are not creating the kind of, it's an advantage to have a vibrant, youthful labor force, but then you must be able to grow your economies in such a way that it creates opportunities for them. If it doesn't, then you begin to see an adverse effect, either in terms of them migrating or getting so frustrated that, yes, they would get involved in all kinds of funny things. You are lucky that they come out and demonstrate. If they come out and demonstrate, it's better. If they keep their frustrations in and there's a civil uprising or there's a coup d'etat, that is worse. And so the space should be made available for them to come out and be able to vent their frustration. They are leading in innovation, and we're seeing very, important steps in terms of the technology and information technology space. There are a lot of fintechs, payment platforms, app developers. I mean, it is going so fast that it is government that is having to keep up, because the technology is there and the young people are accessing it and they're using it. And so government must keep up with them because they are going anyway. If you don't create the space for them to harness their potential, they will continue to develop that potential. And so it's only natural that government must facilitate it. And that's why when I was president, I built what we call the Accra Digital Center. It's a multi-purpose center that has hundreds of offices and places for tech startups, incubators and all that. And a lot of the companies that today are fintechs and others started in the Accra Digital Center. And I think government should continue to pay attention to that. One of the things that, Africa has an advantage of is that we don't need to go and recreate the wheel. When it comes to information technology and the digital space, we are able to leapfrog to the latest technologies. And that is happening in Africa. Until COVID struck, Africa had the fastest growing broadband connections in the whole world. And if you go to every African country today, payment platforms using mobile money and so on and so forth have come on stream. And so something good is happening in that space. In my own country, services have long overtaken agriculture as the biggest contributor to gross domestic product. Today, services, banking, tourism, hospitality, financial services, and so on and so forth, contribute almost 49% of gross domestic product. And other, including oil and all the other sectors, construction and everything, contribute 51%. And so that's a very important area that government must look at, because data transmission, networking and things are a big part of that service industry and contributing to Ghana's economic growth. I've met several prophets on this visit, and I think my brother who spoke was prophesying into my life, that I'll be president. I thank you for your prophecy, and I will work hard to make it come to fruition. It says, what do we do with fiscally challenged people? Fiscally challenged people have a very uphill task in our country because the social support systems are not sufficient for them. I know, because I had a brother who was crippled by polio, and he's deceased. But I know the struggles that he went through in terms of my financing his education, access to public buildings and things. We passed the disability law, and it gave a time frame and said by a certain date all public buildings must have access for persons living with disability. There's a law that says that a certain percentage of every workforce in every establishment should be reserved for persons living with disability. The problem has been enforcement, to make sure that people are complying, and if they're not complying, to take out the appropriate sanctions against them. And so we have the Society of Physically Challenged. It's a strong advocacy group, and everybody must take them seriously, because it's estimated that the percentage of persons living with disability amounts to about 10% of our population. And so it means if we are 29 million, then it means almost 3 million people are persons living with disability. And these are people who are voters. And so it's something that we need to take cognition of. We have a District Assembly's Common Fund, and a portion of it is reserved for programs of disability. But unfortunately, recently, because government has not been releasing that fund to the district assemblies, it has made it impossible for them to provide that money to persons with disability. And so that's one of the things we need to sort out, that when we come, we should make sure that that money goes so that it's able to make life better for our persons living with disability. What do I do about negative news and information about myself and my family? It's an occupational hazard. You really can't do anything about it, especially in the new media space, you know. And I think I won't be the only leader to have suffered it. I'm sure Prime Minister Trudeau probably also has his own share of problems. I'm sure President Trump, Obama had his fair share. For many people in America still believe Obama is a terrorist and that he's not an American. You know, so these are things that you can't do anything about. When I was president, some social media put out that I had purchased a hotel in Dubai. Up to now, we're looking for that hotel so that I can claim my shares because I need the money, you know. And many other stories about you. The thing is, if you think about it, you would not have the focus to do the work you have to do. And so it's an occupational hazard. There will be negative stories about you. And you just have to find a way of living with it. Those that you can respond to and correct, you do. But there's a lot of, if you want to spend your time going through the media and looking for every negative story about you and responding to it, I don't think you have enough time to work. And in Ghana, we have a 4-year term. 4 years is a short time. If you spend all the time responding to stories about you, by the time you realize you're into a next election. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see my colleagues on both sides. You are eager to ask your questions, but in the interest of time, I would want to ask Mr. President's permission. Is it okay if we went over by 5-10 minutes?
Okay.
Thank you so much. Okay, I will take 2 questions from this side. Okay, let's go to that side, to the left. 2 questions from that side. Please keep it brief, and then so that we can reach the...
Your Excellency, thank you for the visit. I'm Xavier Ahodector from the Volta region of Ghana.
Okay.
And here I'm reading Applied Linguistics in French, MA. In your speech, you talk about partnership between African countries, and you can see that Ghana is surrounded by 3 francophone countries. So I want to know, what is your roadmap? What is your policy for French language in Ghana? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's an honor to be able to ask you these few questions. This question, one. It's long, but I'll summarize it. I am Benjan, MG Chemical and Petroleum Engineer, but I'm from the mining zone in Ghana. And I want to ask you something about the gold and other natural resources. Yesterday, the Fallen Elephant government signed a very good contract. They are aiming to be the best contract of all. Based on all the successive government, the Gordon Gosbert style of governance, of which you are not different from. Over the years,
I could go to that side.
Yeah. Please do.
Yes. Your question must be very heavy.
The microphone can't take it.
Thank you, Your Excellency. My name is Ambotua Kaki, a PhD candidate at the Department of Political Science. Please, in your speech, you mentioned that good governance is crucial to Africa's development, and I also believe a healthy population is key to promoting good governance. And HIV and other diseases on the continent are affecting the continent's development. And so one of the strategies of addressing HIV in Ghana was the establishment of the Ghana AIDS Commission under the office of the President to coordinate and oversee the response to the epidemic in the country. So, Your Excellency, please, I would like to know that during your time as a President, what are some of the roles you played to address HIV/AIDS in Ghana? Thank you.
That's just a question, and I think we will done on this side. My apologies.
Thank you. Good evening to His Excellency and to His most valued delegation. My name is Clement Maeva Kwaku, and I come from Côte d'Ivoire. It is truly an honor to be here today and to have a piece of my culture represented tonight. My question is this. What is the greatest piece of advice that you have for young people like me that look forward to go back home and to participate in development?
Yep. Is it working now?
Is the mic good?
You might have to move.
No. Two of you make your way to the other side. There's two. All right, thank you.
One more.
The students are protesting back here. They don't ask their question, they're going to be mad. So.
Hello, Your Excellency. My name is Rue, and I'm a third-year political science and Greek and Roman studies student. I'm also part of the African Task Force, and a collective question that we have is, given that we're all in academia here, we would like to know what Ghana is doing to fund academics and produce a high-quality research, especially to tell African stories from our perspective, away from Eurocentric influences.
I didn't hear that properly. Are we from Eurocentric influences?
If I may paraphrase, she's asking what Ghana is doing to fund research that would focus on Africa instead of a Eurocentric perspective.
Okay.
Okay.
The very last one. Very last one.
Okay. The very last one. Wow. Okay, I hope this one doesn't break up.
Okay, I'll summarize it. Okay, so based on the Gordon Gosbert style of governance, yesterday the minerals mining lands minister signed a contract that is terming the best contract ever signed in Ghana, giving 1% of the project to the community and 13% stake to the country. Hopefully, when you come to government, when you are sworn in on the 7th January 2025, what will you do differently aside what you did or how you governed when you were in power? Thank you, sir.
I think that is it. My apologies. President Mahama will take these questions and then.
She's a doctor, you guys. She has to.
Okay, just take her. This is the last.
Okay, we have Please, questions, go, and that's
Thank you. My name is Ruby Abenakon. I'm a PhD candidate in linguistics at the University of Victoria. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for that insightful speech. I find that in Ghana and probably most African countries that most developmental projects get discontinued when there's a change in government. Point in question, so many of your projects have been abandoned. So in your view, do you think that there is a way or a strategy for successful government to continue developmental projects? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. This is the last batch of questions, I suppose, so I'll be brief. The first question was on health, HIV and AIDS. I happened to be the first chairman of the board of the Ghana AIDS Commission when it was formed. At the time, I was Minister of Communications. And before we formed the AIDS Commission, HIV had been treated as a health issue, and so it was handled principally by the Ministry of Health. And then the United Nations came and said, no, this is a multisectoral issue, and you cannot handle it effectively only with one sector. And so we formed an intersectoral task force, and the Ministry of Communication was chair of the task force, because a lot of the issues about HIV and AIDS related to prevention, and preventing HIV and AIDS meant that you needed to educate, make people aware, you had to communicate and all that. And so the Ministry of Communications led, and when the Ghana AIDS Commission was formed, I was made the first chair. Indeed, when we started the communications, if you go to Africa, we have a certain aversion to explicit statements on sexuality. And so if you are speaking, you have to be very careful how you choose your words and so on and so forth. And I remember that one of the campaigns we launched was an advert promoting the use of condoms to prevent HIV and AIDS. And the slogan that went to the advert said, if it's not on, it's not in. And we faced such a pushback from traditional authorities. I mean, what is this? You want to corrupt the young children and so on and so forth. But at the time, they didn't realize how desperate the situation was, because it was spreading, phenomenally. And so we had to do a workshop for traditional rulers. We brought them in. We explained to them what HIV and AIDS was, and said that, look, if we didn't do what was necessary, they were soon going to become traditional rulers without subjects to rule over. And that brought them over. And eventually some of them volunteered to do some of the adverts for us. And so we put them on national TV, and they spoke. And these are respected traditional rulers, so they spoke about HIV and AIDS. And I think that we made good progress. Actually, we were able to roll back the rate of infection. And once antiretrovirals came, working with the Global Fund and all that, we made sure that antiretrovirals were available. And as a result of that, we've chalked many successes when it comes to HIV and AIDS. The Ghana AIDS Commission is still the principal driver when it comes to strategies of HIV and AIDS. They produce a very important report every year showing how the disease is being tracked. One of the important interventions that we introduced was zero transmission from mother to child. And so we made it compulsory for all pregnant women to be tested. And if they tested positive, we made sure that they got antiretroviral drugs free of charge, so that the virus did not jump from the mother to the child. And so we had a generation of children who were born to HIV mothers but were free of HIV. And the mothers were advised not to breastfeed and all that, so that the children could stay HIV free. So it's been a success story, and I think that Ghana AIDS Commission, if the story of the fight against HIV comes to be, and AIDS comes to be written, the name of the Ghana AIDS Commission will be written in letters of gold, and I'll encourage them to continue to work. French language, like you said, it's true. Ghana is surrounded by French-speaking countries, Cote d'Ivoire to our west, Togo to our east, and Burkina Faso to our north. And so over the years, French has been made a compulsory subject of study in our schools. The difficulty is that we do not have enough French teachers. And so the children take French, but many times you go to a school and there's no French teacher. The La Francophonie has been trying to help by providing scholarships to train French teachers, but we simply just don't have enough. And so my hope is that when our colleague here finishes, he will come back home and come and help to boost the number of French teachers we have. We all admire Canada very much because of your bilingual nature, and you slip from French to English so easily. I wish I could do the same. I studied French in secondary school, but the lack of ability to practice it, has made it recede in my mind. But I know that if I were immersed in a French-speaking society, I'm sure that in a few weeks it will start to re-emerge. And so maybe I have to come and stay in Quebec or somewhere and, be able to remember all the French I learned in secondary school. Advice for young people who have finished their studies here or are working here about going back home. I was asked the same question in Halifax, and I said that if you finish your studies, we encourage that you come back home and come and help. But of course, nobody wants you to come home and get frustrated. For those who finance their own education, they are not bonded students, and so you cannot force them to come back. For those who come on scholarships from Ghana, most of the time you are asked to sign a bond, and the bond means that you must come back and help with national development. And so if you sign the legal bond, you must come back and help. But if you finance your own education, then, you decide how you want to do it. But I was saying you need to come home, make sure that when you come back, you are coming back to be able to fit into something and be able to realize your potential. If you're coming back to just join the sea of frustrated young people who cannot find jobs and are not able to invest in something, then you might have a problem, and it's leading to mental health issues. I know people who unadvisedly just picked up their bags, went to the airport and flew back home and came, and they have become so frustrated. For those who are able to, they quickly run back. For those who are not able to, they stay, and they have all kinds of issues and frustrations. So make sure that you have a niche that you can fit in when you get back home, so that you don't come back home and get frustrated, and it could lead to all kinds of things. But Africa needs its young people to come back. There are several examples of people who came back and are some of the most successful people. Some went into the hospitality industry, others came and invested their capital, built hotels, others are in the IT space. When I was minister, there was a young man who came from the United States, and he had studied computer technology and all that, and he was into the new wave of internet and telephony that was rolling out, mobile telephony and all that. And so he decided to come back home. He came home as Minister of Communications, and all he wanted was a license to set up an internet cafe. And so I asked the NCA to give it to him. And he set up the internet cafe, and he started to build his company. Today, he has the biggest data transmission company in Ghana. All the banks are riding on his network. All the digital TV in Ghana is riding on his network. And, he is big. And so that's one of the success stories. You could be that success story too. But you need to make sure that you know into which niche you're coming to fit and how you're going to take advantage of the opportunities that exist to be able to build yourself up. How do we work to focus on Africa? I believe that Africa has solutions for whatever challenges it has, and that is contained in the AU Building the Africa We Want, a 2063 document. We cannot continue to look back and blame our colonial past or our past of slavery. I believe that we can also work to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. Already, like I said, in the IT space, if you look, the technology is available. And it leads me to the question, the last questioner about, the one who had a mishap with the microphone when he talked about mining and contracts. In the past, we didn't have access to technology and capital. Today, there's technology, there's capital, and Ghanaian businesses have it. And so you see that Ghanaian businesses are going successfully into mining ventures. Ghana was called the Gold Coast, is blessed with gold from the Atlantic coast right up to our northern border. Virtually everywhere you dig in the western part of the country, the gold veins run through there. And so there's a lot of gold. And many mining companies are coming and taking leases and establishing mining projects. But aside from that too, it has its downside. We have illegal small-scale mining that is destroying our vegetation. People take an excavator, go and dig up anywhere, wash the little gold they can find, and then they just abandon the contaminated water and things like that. So that also creates a challenge. In the revolutionary years, the World Bank and IMF puts pressure on us to divest state enterprises. And so it was during the period of the Economic Recovery Program, for those of you who are grown enough. And some of the industries that we divested included mining companies. One of them was a state gold mining company, SGMC, which had been operating at a loss. A company came and offered to buy it, a foreign company. One, we didn't have the technology, we didn't have the capital to make it a first-class mine. So we sold it to them, $5 million. They came, and he mentioned Gordon Gaggisberg. From Gordon Gaggisberg's time, from colonial times, we had been mining gold, and the tailings, that is, after you wash and take the gold out, what is left is called tailings. The tailings had created a huge mountain in the township of Takwa, where the gold mine is. At the time that this gold was washed, the technology could take out only 45% of the gold. And so you had 55% of gold still sitting in those tailings. And the new technology had come for being able to extract gold to up to 95% out of the ore. We didn't have it. This new company had it. So they bought our mine for $5 million. They brought the machines. That whole mountain, they washed all the tailings. And by the time they finished washing the tailings, they had made a few hundreds of millions of dollars. And so they paid us our $5 million. And the rest was profit. And they invested it in the mine. Today, that mine is worth billions of dollars. But today, we have the technology, and the strategy that is being used is good, because like you said, a lease was signed recently, and that is for a lithium mine. But it's not only about having a bigger share in lithium, it's about taking part of the processing and bringing it into Ghana. And so it's not about owning it. We own it because we paid for it. We've set up the Mineral Incomes Investment Fund. And all the royalties, the 10% carried interest, and all the royalties due to government are paid into that fund. And in every venture, government reserves the right to acquire more shares. And so even in oil, we have a 10% free carried interest. GMPC has interest. And so if we have the money, the capital, we can say, look, we want another 10%, like we did recently. I'm sure you heard of Jubilee Oil Holding Limited. That's another 7%. When one of the companies was selling its stake, Ghana bought it. And so if we have the capital, we can continue to increase our stake in these mineral developments like we've done for lithium. But I'm saying that it's not only about owning the production of the raw material, it's about bringing some of that processing into Ghana, bringing gold refining into Ghana, so that we are exporting refined gold instead of raw bullion, that we are refining the lithium into at least the secondary process before the final process is finished elsewhere. So for me, that is what is important. But it's a good first step that we have signed a contract like that. And we must look at other ventures like gold mining and other things in which Ghana has a comparative advantage. And if we have the capital, we should acquire more interest in them so that more of whatever profit is produced remains in Ghana. And the final one is about abandoned projects. Indeed, that is one of the major disturbing developments in our democracy. And I think that is something that we must look at. I've made a promise that if I become president, we're not going to start any new projects in the first 2 years. Any resource that we're able to raise, rather than start new projects, we're going to apply to complete all the abandoned projects that have been left by previous governments. Because you go, you find half-finished markets, you find hospitals. There's one hospital that's 90% complete and is being overgrown by weeds. It doesn't make sense because this is the taxpayers' money. And the only thing is, if I complete it, the credit will go to the previous government, to go to Mahama. So we'll rather abandon the hospital than do it. I don't think it's patriotic enough. I don't think it's an efficient use of our taxpayers' money. And that's why I made the promise that we shouldn't start new projects. Let's use all our resources to finish the projects that were abandoned from my time. I was building community day secondary schools because we're going to implement a free senior high school program. And I thought that if we built more community day schools, when there's an increase in the number of children coming to secondary schools, we would have those schools available for them to go. And it will make it cheaper if the students are day students because they go to school, they don't pay any fees, but they go home to sleep and eat. All government does is to provide them one hot meal in the afternoon, and it will be a cheaper option. But in Ghana, the main secondary system is a boarding system. And so it means you have to keep the children in school, you have to feed them, you have to provide them with accommodation, you have to pay electricity, water, and all that. And so we started building these community day schools. The new government came and abandoned many of them. And so you go to a community, you see the building is finished, it's been roofed, the doors, windows, everything are there. Some of them is just left with putting furniture in and allowing children to go in. But it's just standing. And you have reptiles and snakes studying instead of children studying in those schools. You know, so we must put our concentration and focus on finishing those abandoned projects so that our people can get use of them rather than rushing to start our own new projects in order that we can take credit for. I agree. It's in our constitution. Our constitution enjoins a succeeding government, you know, to continue the projects handed over to it by the previous government. It's in the constitution. But I think that people are not reading the constitution, or if they've read it, they've just made their minds that they're not willing to comply with that provision. Thank you very much.
I will ask for another round of applause for President Mahama. Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure moderating this session tonight. Once again, thank you and your delegation for coming and for all the insights that you've shared with us tonight. On this note, I would like to introduce a very important person in the University of Calgary community, as well as Calgary as a whole. They were a highly sought after athlete in their playing days in the Canadian Football